Well, hello and welcome to a conversation with the Church Hub. My name is Brian Holt. I get to be your host today. I've been in pastoral ministry 20 years, and I'm joined by Garrett Higbee. Garrett has been a pastor and served pastors, and one of the things I love about Garrett is he has the ability to understand what's happening beneath the surface. So as we dive into a conversation about spiritual health, I know that he'll bring some incredible insights, both from his professional experience, from his education, but also from just how God has uniquely gifted him to discern what's happening in pastors underneath the surface of their ministry. So, Garrett, thanks for joining us today. Really glad that you're here. And we're going to just jump right into it. So, my first question for today is what is the truest thing about a unique pastor's unique care of their own soul, maybe that most pastors don't quite yet understand?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of angles to that question, but the probably if I had to answer it simply, I would say that pastors mistake the call to ministry and the stewardship of their souls with self-sacrifice and putting it all out there for God. So, in other words, like if I am not kind of putting it all out there for everyone else but myself, then I am failing in my role as pastor. And I don't think that dichotomy is at all biblical. Matter of fact, if you look at First Timothy 4, um, in verse 16, it says, "Keep a close watch on yourself and your teaching and the teaching of the word. Persist in this. By doing so, you will save both yourself and your hearers." And it's interesting there that this admonition from Paul to Timothy, a younger man, is like, hey, I get that this is going to take everything you have, but don't do it at your own expense.
Mm,
Actually, have your own soul, your own personal relationship with Christ, your own anchoredness to the gospel as a primary focus, along with your service, your teaching, your focus on the word to the public proclamation. Talks about persisting in these things, being immersed in these things earlier in that chapter. I love that immersion idea. I love the persistence idea, but it's immersed so that it hits you before it hits them.
yeah. So you're saying that one of the challenges is that we often think about the service to others before we think about the relationship that we have with Christ.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, if self-sacrifice means self-neglect, you got something wrong in your personal relationship with Christ and maybe with your family and the people you love the most. So it doesn't have to be an either or. It is truly a both and. And so the idea of abiding in Christ first to get the power, I think of Colossians 1:28, 1:29, that works mightily through you. The indicatives before the imperatives, like all.
so why do you think we miss that?
I think part of it is the way that we're trained in Bible colleges, seminaries. We focus mainly on the duty of the office or the preaching of the word, or and all that's great and all that's important. But like at the neglect, think of it even in terms of the number of classes a, a seminary student or a Bible student gets on their own soul, or understanding the heart, or working through the blend of marriage and ministry, or I can name 10 topics I would love to teach in a seminary.
Yeah. Um, let me ask, and obviously we want to be sensitive to the sharing of specific details, but as someone who has been in ministry a really long time and who has served alongside other pastors and has served pastors for a substantial amount of time, how have you seen this play out over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I feel very privileged to be able to sit with a pastor and wife on a regular basis. I've done that now hundreds of times with different pastors and wives, usually with friends in tow, so to speak, an advocate couple coming with them. So there's even another level of vulnerability that happens because of that. And it's a privilege. I love doing it. I love pastors, and I want to see them thrive. So, and I think the church hub and everything I do just really that's the intersection right there. Um, I think that what I've seen is pastors and wives coming in and they're just not sure what's wrong. Like, why do I keep ending up in this ditch? And it might be for different reasons with different folks, but it's generally about 3 to 5 areas that they tend to fall into a ditch. And it could be related to their theology and understanding of the gospel. If you really want to get behind what's going on, their abiding relationship with Christ, their expectations of each other or ministry, their identity caught up too much in their position. Like there's some real common themes that I have to work through most of the time.
Yeah. So when you think about those hundreds of pastors that you've been able to be a part of, and care for, and you've referenced, a couple of different um, challenges. Double click on one of those. Maybe it's identity and ministry. How does that play out, and how would a pastor know if that's something that they're struggling with right now?
Yeah, I think like any idol in your life, there's a couple tells. One of them is what do I get most afraid of losing? And what do I get most angry at when you threaten it or you push against it? Those are often really good tells of an idol. So if somebody is um, potentially being critical of you or left your church or your wife is frustrated with how much you're at the office and you're like, what do you want from me? Like
Hmm.
like I'm
Yeah.
constantly pouring myself out and now you're gonna say something to me and they truly are exhausted. They have little margins. So it does feel like an attack, but in reality, you're like, why am I so into like protecting, my role, my reputation, my work flow, whatever it is. And I'm like, what is happening right there? Or why am I so afraid of going to an elder meeting?
Mm,
Why am I so afraid of the feedback I'm going to get after my sermon? Why am I so afraid of Monday morning when I'm beating myself up?
yeah.
Like, what is happening that has got me so depleted or frustrated?
So let me ask maybe our second question as we kind of move forward in this conversation. How is it that a pastor can faithfully preach that they can faithfully preach Christ and the gospel, that they can lead well, but while at the same time becoming spiritually dry, disengaged, or emotionally unhealthy? How does that happen?
Yeah, I think you may have said it in the question, but there's like a disconnect. Okay. Like this is very thematic across multiple, uh, pastor intensives that I do. I'm like, there's a disconnect, and it's usually in their, what I would call their abiding relationship with Jesus Christ. They have a great love for Jesus, they have a great respect, they want to keep Christ central in their life, but they're like it's like this, it's like, it's like for those who are married, they'll relate to this. It's like, I really, really love my wife and I really do respect our covenant, but I don't date her. I don't spend time with her. I don't really communicate with her deeply. And so what are we doing? Like what is that relationship? And so and with Christ, obviously it's quite different. But he is ultimately the most satisfying, the most loving, the most uh, you know, uh, secure, the most safe, the most wonderful relationship in your life. And if you're neglecting what I would call the cultivation of your uh, spiritual formation with Christ, why wouldn't everything else feel a little bit forced or more of a performance?
Yeah. So you're talking about as over time the pastor's spiritual life can be neglected, it can start to decrease. How can a pastor observe or know when the spiritual formation is going negative instead of being built positive as he ministers?
Yeah. I was teaching somewhere and and one of the, things I said related to that very question was drink before you're thirsty. Because what's happening is you don't even know you're getting dehydrated spiritually until you're like not functioning as well. And this is so typical of pastors. Another one was watch the dashboard, but like pastors, it's kind of like a teenager driving a car, like, oh, I have to do something with the oil. I have to watch the temperature gauge. I have to, you know, it's like, yeah, all those gauges are there for a reason. And are you watching them? Are you getting feedback? Are you doing regular maintenance, so to speak? So what I would say is, it isn't that pastors aren't working hard. It isn't that pastors don't love the Lord. It's that they're really running hard um, in what I would call sort of the doing side of ministry, and they haven't sat in the being side of ministry enough. They haven't answered the call in Matthew 11:28 through 30. Come to me, you are weary and heavy. What pastor is not weary and heavy laden? I
Yeah.
mean, what pastor
Right.
doesn't need to go get the yoke off, that the yoke of somebody else's, expectation, the yoke of their own sense of identity in Christ, their yoke of, overworking and under abiding, like all those yokes, God's like, take those off. I know how easy they are to come back on you. Come to me on a regular basis, lay those before me and spend time with me and let me refresh your soul and make your job easier.
I love you're describing the ministry of being and the ministry of doing. Obviously, that's or not a dichotomy, but that's a construct that you've used in the past. Can you give us just a little bit, just to give me a description of the ministry of being and the ministry of doing?
Yeah. So, lately I've been thinking about, how, I've had this disease of alliteration, but like, I was thinking about how believing should move you to becoming, belonging, right? Before it moves to behavior, before it moves to doing. And so the idea is, do I sit and think about what God is, means to me, rehearse the gospel, spend time in the adoration and confession kind of side of my ministry before I move into uh, the work of ministry. So, is it regular for me to have like a quiet time where I am worshiping God, I'm adoring him. I'm not just doing my Bible and maybe even doing it for ministry prep,
Yeah.
which is not even really feeding your own soul. So am I encountering God in the scriptures, and then does it move me to worship? Okay. Then am I confessing and lamenting regularly, because I would think to keep my soul, clean and to keep my conscience clear, I have to confess and lament because ministry's hard. Like I don't know about every pastor, but I do that every day. Um, and then I moved to supplication and thanksgiving and maybe something. I'm like, God, I'm about to go do this. Just give me strength. I'm not looking for God to bless my idea of what the ministry is today. I'm asking Him to give me a spirit led, humble, dependent kind of heart so that I don't end up doing ministry that's not necessary or not really his best. So, I think the being is sitting with Jesus, sitting with the scriptures, sitting with worship music, sitting with whatever moves you to abide more deeply before you get up and do.
Um, Let me ask, as we kind of continue on, um, I think that sometimes ministry and the public presentation of spiritual things can become a mask for what's actually happening behind the surface or behind the scenes. Have you noticed, or when does ministry itself become a way of performing for God or hiding from God?
Yeah. Well, I have kind of a benevolent perspective on that for pastors because I don't think pastors want to live behind a mask. And I don't think that they appreciate feeling that they have to sometimes. Um, and same with pastors' wives. That if they always have to put their first and best foot forward, if they can't be weak, they can't fail, they can't be broken in their desire to help other people because it's not safe because others will leave the church, judge them, maybe even disqualify them for something that's really more of a debilitation than a disqualification. Then why let down the mask? Why show them more than what you must to feel somewhat authentic? To move to transparency and vulnerability is such a high risk for pastors in many cases. Now, you could say, well, they made that culture. So, come on, guys. Like, why did you? But sometimes they adopted that culture. And sometimes that culture is really strong and it takes a lot to break through. But I would say that, like, to give permission to pastors and wives, like, find people that are life-giving and you're safe with and get real. Do you have to have I think of Proverbs 17:17 talks about a friend that loves at all times. And there's a brother born for adversity. And then 18:24 talks about a man of many companions will fail. And it's talking about fair weather friends, but it's talking, and then it talks about there's a friend that's closer than a brother. I think it's pointing to Christ. I think it's, a foretelling of the gospel, but it's also pointing to people that love you even with all your brokenness and faults and are willing to support you and help you. So if you could create that culture, and I go around in churches around the world trying to create that culture. I mean, that's one of the things I'm most passionate about is creating a culture of transforming discipleship and care that's very authentic and it moves through to transparent and vulnerable over time. But the average pastor's not living in that reality. And so it's pretty hard now on the other side of that coin is the fear of man. It's one of the 5 deadly, things to thrive in ministry is the fear of man. It'll prove to be a snare. Trusting in the Lord will keep you safe. You can't call yourself a bondservant of Jesus Christ and still try to please man. I mean, there's so many scriptures that challenge us to do things for an audience of one, to do things for the glory of God, to consider man and to try to love man, but to fear man and to love man is not the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. Let me ask, so let's say a pastor's listening to this and he identifies with that. He says, "Yes, I am in a spot now where I don't feel like I can be fully authentic, transparent, vulnerable with my congregation. Uh, Afraid of that. There's a variety of reasons. Maybe it is I haven't built the culture. Maybe it is I have my own insecurities and identity problems. Maybe it is because I tried it once and it didn't go well." Um, in order to move that forward, if a pastor feels that today, what would you say is the first step towards saying, here's how you move forward in vulnerability with your congregation in such a way that spiritual health is grown?
First thing I'd say is, do you have some confidants in your life? Okay. Not allies, lots of allies, not very many confidants in the pastor and wife's life. That's true. That's always going to probably be true. But do you have a few confidants? Because you're going to need them to have the courage to go in there and begin to push the culture towards more transparency. Like, you can't do it alone, and you need to make sure your soul is being taken care of so you don't just, like, bleed out on people or get so angry that you go in and do some kind of sermon that, like, half the people didn't even know they were, like, making that difficult for you. So you have to be in a settled, uh, abiding, place with Christ and community to be able to get the culture to shift.
So that's a really interesting. I want to kind of just pause on something you said. That there's a level of vulnerability in preaching or in ministry that is fruitful and example, and it is a natural connection. But you referenced something that I think is fascinating, that you're not bleeding on people.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting dynamic towards the care of the pastor's soul, and you referred to it as confidants and not allies. For someone that maybe is like, hey, I don't. How would you describe the difference between a confidant and an ally? How do I know the difference?
Okay, so an ally, and you'll have allies in ministry. They are on the same mission as you. They love that you're on mission with them, but they're likely to be able to take you for granted and use your giftedness to get the mission accomplished. Okay, they're not as concerned about your soul, your welfare, your balance, your family. It's not that they're mean about it or they're malicious. They're on mission with you. So they're like, let's go and let's not worry about burning out or anything else. Whereas the confidant goes, hey, I'm very excited about your giftedness. I'm very excited about the kingdom responsibilities, but you're just a steward and you're limited and you have, you need love, you need protection, you need care. And I'm here to remind you of that and to provide that whenever possible. That's a confidant. They're few, but they're super valuable. And here's Brian. I don't know how much you watch the statistics out there, but here's the reality that's kind of sobering and hard to believe. The average pastor doesn't have a confidant in the church, and often maybe not elsewhere. But mostly, like, over probably 80% don't have someone in the church like that, and probably 50% don't have it anywhere.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. So I grew up as a pastor's kid. My dad was a solo pastor, and served faithfully, unbelievable teacher. And I was young, but looking back, I'm like that was a huge area. Like, he didn't have a safe place or a safe person. I think maybe he had one. But how much into that was he willing to be vulnerable
Yep.
and invest in that relationship? And I've had the blessing, I see it as a gift from God of being in environments where I have had that. Now it's taken some work, and
Yep.
and I've been it's not always been fun. It's not always been easy to have a confidant that's like, hey man, I love this, but you got to tune this up. You got to pay
Yeah.
attention to this because that's not going in the right direction. Is a humbling thing, and it is a challenging thing to hear. But if we're going to arrive at spiritual health and fruitfulness for the long term, I need those people around me. Like if I'm isolated, that's just not going to end anywhere good.
Well, and think about it this way, Brian. So I really appreciate your story and just how personal that is. Um, think about it this way, if for no other reason, do it for God and do it for your people. Like, get people in your life that love you, but also, the wounds of a friend are there, um, at times, but like they love you and they care for you and they're not giving up on you and they're for you and your marriage and your kids and those kind of people are invaluable. And I would say necessary to go the long haul in ministry. And if you're thinking, you know, am I really the kind of disciple of Christ that people would want to imitate?
Hmm.
Because I really, if for no other reason, I ought to be a transforming disciple before a transforming disciple maker, because people need to imitate Christ in me, not
Yeah.
imitate me. And if
Right.
I'm way out of whack or way out of balance or not taking care of my soul or I don't have deep friendships, is that what I would want for my people? I don't think so.
Yeah. 1 Corinthians 11:1. It's such a
Yep.
sobering, imitate me as I imitate Christ.
Right.
And I'm like, oof. No, I like imitating Christ, but
Yeah.
and it doesn't mean perfection. I don't want to stand that I have to be the perfect example, but the growing example that people can imitate and grow
Yes.
with, right? Like,
Yes.
that is a huge and heavy and kind of scary thing. But thankfully, we have the Spirit, we have the Word, and we have friends and confidants if we're willing. Let me ask, sometimes I think it maybe feels or seems counterintuitive. I'm going to kind of shift just a little bit that we can see ministry fruitfulness, whether it's church growth or whether it's advancement of the mission. However, we're going to choose to whatever metrics we use, but we see positive momentum in ministry. Yet at the same time, sometimes those are the seasons perhaps where the pastor's spiritual tank is depleting. H- how does that happen? Why does that happen? How can we maybe guard against that?
Yeah, it is very true that there are things that I think are life sucking for pastors. And believe it or not, some of them are you measure them by metrics and you think you're succeeding. So, in other words, rapid church
Mm,
growth.
yeah. We think we
Okay,
should all
that,
celebrate that.
that
And yet at the same time, that's maybe the most dangerous time.
exactly. So, it, I am all for church growth. I am all for getting as many people saved and baptized and in a Bible teaching church as possible. I know that's
Absolutely.
what we're all about, and we want to help pastors do well at that. However, anticipate with rapid church growth, rapid depletion of your best leaders, soul, energy, emotions, relationship, spiritual, emotional, relational health will go down as rapid church growth goes up, or the demands for counseling go up, or some new opportunity that only your pastor can do, or whatever it is that seems really good on the outside, but at a cost, and I don't think we count the cost. I don't think we count the cost because our metrics are, how many people are coming, how's our giving, are people serving? And those are all great metrics, but they're not enough. We should be like, and how well are we taking care of our senior leaders, and are we on a sabbatical rhythm, and are our leaders taking Sabbath, and if we asked the ministry wives how things were going, would they say the same thing the ministry men are saying in the elder room or in the staff meeting? Probably not. And if there's a gap there at all, figure out what it is and pay attention to it. Will it slow you down a little? It might. Will it take some resources? It will. Will it take some vulnerability? It does. But absolutely, if you want long-term sustainability and health in your culture, you have.
Yeah. So I liked that when you kind of had some of those other metrics. Just give us that list again. What are the metrics that in a rapid growth or rapid expansion or fruitfulness season, what else should we be looking at?
Yeah, are we taking care of our senior leaders, particularly our pastor and wife? But don't limit it to just your lead pastor. There's other people pouring out right alongside your pastor, other pastoral staff, particularly full time, but even some part time. There's certain elders that have stepped up and are filling a gap and probably running pretty hard too. And are we taking care of each other? Have we created a leadership culture where we live out the one another's as a team? And I'm telling you, it's huge. It's a huge opportunity. You don't even see it as an obstacle. See it as an opportunity. Are we living out the one another? So am I loving you, praying for you, encouraging you, um, confessing to you? Are we talking about what's hard and where I'm weak and what we need help and prayer for? Are we bringing other people around? Are we equipping the saints so we're not doing all the work? Are we building an infrastructure because we're about to expand the church? And so the trellis needs to be expanded with the building plan. And if the trellis isn't expanded, the building plan itself will begin to, you know, fill seats, but then draw from resources. Maybe we're going to go plant another church. We're sending 100 of our best leaders, but we haven't thought about the cost of that on the rest of the leadership or congregation. So are we taking care of our leaders? Are we taking a weekly Sabbath, which is a really an abiding day with your family and with God? Are we doing sabbaticals on a rotation and making sure guys are getting out? Even some of the gals getting out that are full time on some kind of planned break where they're really diving deep in their relationship with Christ and family. Are we checking with spouses once in a while, like, hey, how do you guys think we're doing? And particularly spiritually, relationally, and emotionally. I promise you, the wives, particularly, but even some women have husbands that are concerned for them too in the ministry full time.
They'll tell you.
How are we doing? Man,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a huge help.
I love and I think this is probably revolutionary for a lot of leadership teams. Are we doing the one another's? And I think you've given a great framework for what that could look like. But the idea of we're asking people to go out and lead small groups or life groups or home groups or discipleship environments, we're asking the congregation to do that for one another. But are we as a leadership team, elders, pastors, staff, actually doing that for one another or ensuring that it's happening for each other? In these environments, I think I mean, I wish it wasn't revolutionary, but I feel like it
I,
probably
it, it
is.
it is. I know. I'm with you. It's something. I think it's something we've lost, and what's happened. And I would say, in my experience, Brian, it's not happening in most leadership cultures. They're getting the work done, and they do care about each other. It's not like they're completely stoic and disconnected from each other. They want each other to do well, but they're not going the next step to ask the heart revealing question, or to sit and break out into prayer groups in their after or before an elder meeting, or to sit as staff and pick a mentor that's going to walk you through this onboarding process in a way that's very intimate and relational, truly mentoring you through it. Those kinds of things aren't typically happening in the church. And when it doesn't happen, I love the book Lead that Paul Tripp wrote. I think that would be worth taking an elder team through. You could take them through T1, the mutual care 10 one another's that we teach small groups. Before you teach your small group leaders to take their people through it, take your staff team or your elder team through it. It will change the culture of leadership in your church.
And just for anybody that doesn't know, that T1 is from Soul Care Consulting. That's the ministry that you lead, helping churches develop this discipleship culture. So thank you for that. Let me ask, as we kind of get towards the end of our conversation, as we sort of conclude, one of the things that I love to hear from all pastors is, you've spent decades in ministry and caring for pastors. As you look back, what is it that young Garrett believed or thought or was interested in, passionate about, that maybe maturer Garrett is changed your mind about?
Yeah, I way underestimated uh, the burden of being an elder or pastor, and until I was installed as an elder at College Park Church in 1999, and I was getting ready to start 12 Stones ministry, but somebody wise, a very wise older man, said, "You're not really ready," and I'm like, "Well, what do you mean? I'm so fired up, and I've been counseling for a while. My marriage is in good shape." He's like, "You don't know what it means to be an elder. You don't know what it means ultimately to be a pastor in the church full time, and yet you want to help all these churches and these individuals and these leaders." And I was like, Tammy and I just stopped and said, "I think you're right." So I went and talked to my pastor. He goes, "Well, I've got an easy fix for that. Come work here." And so I was the first soul care pastor at College Park, and I did that for almost 5 years. And it was life changing in the sense of the weight of ministry that came on my shoulders as soon as I was in the office of elder. The spiritual warfare, the heavy demands of the congregation, the deep concerns for our direction, the doctrinal conviction that I had to move into philosophical and methodological means, and then stick to it and remember and remind and align people to it over and over again. It was exhausting. So, first of all, I underestimated what it takes to be an elder or a pastor, and I would say they're of the same office in a way. The lead pastor has unusually higher demands in terms of sermon prep and other things, but all the elders, all the staff have this weight on them, or if they don't, then they're not under shepherds of Jesus Christ, they're hired hands. But let's say most of them do. And then the other is I had no category for succeeding in the pulpit and failing as a leader, as a godly leader. I didn't know that was possible. I didn't know you could deliver a life-changing message on Sunday and be completely struggling with an integrity gap on Monday. I had no idea that was even a thing. I just thought if somebody is preaching and their ministry is growing, they must be really, really close with Jesus, and they must be anointed in a way
Yeah,
that there
take
can't
the
be
help for
any
granted. Yeah.
major struggle or sin issue in their life. Wrong. um, and so now understanding that just because something looks like it's good on the outside or growing as far as the metrics we talked about earlier, it doesn't mean the pastor and wife are doing well or even the leadership culture is healthy.
Yeah. Let me ask, as we conclude, I think that's right. And if a pastor recognizes himself in this conversation, or if an elder, or, let's just say that there's some recognition around the table or in my own personal life that, hey, I'm not as healthy as people think I am. Maybe the
Yeah.
sermon is going great. Maybe the church is growing. Maybe there's so much ministry fruit, but inside, after listening to this conversation, or I've known it for a while, I'm not as healthy as people think I am. What would you encourage him to do right now?
Yeah. Um, First of all, I think we go back to, is there a friend in your life that you could have that conversation with. It will be so healthy for you, so I think life-giving for you to say, "Hey, can we talk?" It might have to be on a Zoom call or something because they're in another state, and so make that happen. But ideally, you'd fly out there or they'd fly to you, and you just sit down and you talk for a day or 2 about this reality is I'm not doing that well. And here's why, and my wife's been saying it, or my husband's been concerned about my amount I'm pouring out, or the how much identity I have in my role, or whatever it might be. And that person walks you through and prays for you, and maybe you come to 12 Stones, the leader care side of 12 Stones. Maybe you go to a local counselor who's got years of ministry experience and is going to be a safe place and an experienced place to get some help. In some cases, you might even be able to go to a colleague in the church or something. Start with your own spouse, obviously, if you haven't had that conversation. But then go to trusted resources around you that I promise they're there if you look for them. And or you might have to be intentional to push through the fear or the pride, to be able to humble yourself. But I love what God says in First Peter. He's talking about, you know, humble yourself, in due time I will exalt you. Cast your anxieties, your fears, your troubles on me, and for I care for you. And he'll open a way for you to close the integrity gap, to care for your soul, to heal your marriage, to do whatever you need done, because he cares about you as a person before a pastor, sheep before a shepherd, and he wants to heal your soul, heal your marriage, heal your leadership culture before he expands it. And so just whatever that looks like for you, step into that next thing.
Yeah, and I think it can be scary for a pastor to take that first step, but I love the reminder that it's not it's not the motivation should not necessarily just be the fear of what will happen if I don't. Right. Think about, but that it should be the reminder that this is that we serve a loving God, and He wants us to move forward in faith and trust and build us up, that He cares for us as individuals, not just what we can accomplish, not just what we can achieve in His name, but the intimacy with the Lord. He cares about that and wants to be able to step into that. I think is a beautiful thing. It's also one of the reasons you talk about friends and trusted environments. It's one of the reasons we do the Barnabas Room, the cohorts here at the Church Hub, is because we've got pastors that have been through 40 years of ministry, and have served faithfully and have reached the end. We would say, well done, and be able to sit around a safe table with peers, and a trusted mentor. It's why we're here having this conversation. It's because we want pastors to be able to take these steps forward, not ignore the state of their soul, but to step forward in spiritual health. As we conclude, let me just ask, is there anything that you want to say to the pastors that might be listening, that would encourage them, give them hope, move them forward?
Yeah, I would just say, there was an old saying, as I was trained in psychology before the Bible, but I think it's true for both, and I think I can show in Scripture. But you're only as sick as your secrets. And Proverbs 28:13 says, "A man who conceals his sin," and I would say honestly his suffering too, will not prosper. But he who confesses and forsakes their sin will receive mercy. God wants to give you mercy. He wants to treat you better than you deserve. He wants to put grace in the place of a dryness or a wound that you have, and he's deeply concerned for you. So if you take the next step, trusting God, not necessarily everybody around you, because some people have been critical, some people have disappointed you, some people have left you. You need to lament that, but don't keep protecting yourself, um, because you're isolating yourself from the best God has for you or your family in doing so. So I would encourage you, go, check out the Barnabas Room. Chip's an amazing guy, loves pastors, safe man to be broken with. Check out healthy leadership through something like 12 Stones if you need something more intensive. 12stones.org would be where you would go for that. You know, check out what it looks like to take your leadership team through a book like Lead, one that creates a kind of a desire to go deeper, to live out the one another's with each other. Check those kind of things out, and don't let this just be another podcast or another thing I watched on YouTube or another thing I tuned into and said, yeah, yeah, yep, yep, and then not do something with it.
Yeah.
Take the next step.
Yeah, there are resources available. There are people that want the opportunity to love and care for you and encourage you forward. Just don't be like, "Oh yeah, I probably should do something about that," and
Yep,
then don't. Like, yeah,
exactly.
I'm thankful for that. Well, Garrett, thank you for your time. Thank you for your years of faithful ministry to pastors. I know that I have been the direct recipient of that care and the downline recipient of how you've cared for others. So I just really so deeply appreciate you and how you've allowed God to work through you. And I appreciate our time. I hope that this has been fruitful for anybody that's listening. We would love to help you take that next step in your spiritual health. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.